A narcissist lives with the illusion that they can control the ending of every relationship, that no one leaves unless they allow it, that even if you walk away, sooner or later you'll come back, begging, regretting, or at the very least still watching them from afar. In their world, permanent departure doesn't exist. There are only temporary retreats, pauses in the performance before you return to your old role, fueling the ego they depend on to exist. But one day, the truth becomes undeniable. The day they realize you're not coming back. You demanches. No message, no glance. No longer there to explain, to forgive, or to hold on. You didn't just leave physically. You withdrew your attention, your emotions, your energy, the very lifeblood of their identity. And to a narcissist, this isn't just a breakup. It's an identity crisis, a quiet collapse, slow yet devastating. What they'll never say, what they likely can't even admit to themselves, is the deep fear that floods them when they are no longer the center of your universe. Their entire existence is shaped through the eyes of others. They don't have a stable sense of self, only a patchwork of reactions, a reflected personality built from how others see them, and you, the one who once loved them with patience and sincerity, were the largest mirror they ever had. While you were still there, they believed you'd never really leave. Despite the pain, despite the heartbreak, you stayed. You forgave. You hoped. You tried to rescue. Something they never knew how to value. But now that mirror has shattered, and they no longer see themselves in your eyes. There's no one left to reflect back the grand illusion they constructed. That's when the panic sets in, not through outbursts or tears, but in eerie silence. Sleepless nights, mindless clicks onto your social media page, moments they think of you, not out of love, but out of desperation to see themselves again through the only gaze that ever truly saw them. But you're not there anymore, and that strikes their deepest fear. Becoming invisible. In today's video, we're going to peel back the psychological layers of a narcissist's mind when they realize you're never coming back. No more hope, no more power, no more illusion. We'll expose the truth they hide behind fake smiles, rebound relationships, and the stories they spin to save face. We'll walk through each stage: denial, rage, panic, collapse, and the final loneliness that no one else sees. Not to pity them, but so that you, the one who once hurt, once loved, and finally woke up, can better understand why your silent departure was the wake-up call they were never prepared to hear. Let's begin. 1. They're probably just mad. When you first walk away, the narcissist doesn't see it as the end. In their mind, you're simply upset, throwing a temporary tantrum. They fully believe you'll come back, just like every time before. The familiar cycle: silence, then a message, then forgiveness. That's how they've trained you in their view. And more than that, they're convinced you can't survive without them. In this first stage, the narcissist's default reaction is denial, not of emotions, but of reality itself. They cannot accept that you've exited the relationship for good. In their worldview, that scenario isn't even possible, because if it were true, they'd have to face the terrifying fact that they're no longer the center of your universe. During this denial phase, they soothe themselves with phrases like, "She just needs some time. He's testing me. Give it a few days. They'll come back like always." This isn't confidence, it's delusion disguised as control. To a narcissist, no one can truly walk away unless they say so. It's a defense mechanism, because admitting that you've really left means confronting the emptiness they've always tried to outrun. You'll witness their performance. They'll go out of their way to appear unbothered. Social media becomes their stage, constant updates, smiling photos, nights out, or even pictures with someone new. In conversations, they avoid mentioning you or say things like, "I'm doing great, everything's fine." Quietly, they stalk your online presence, watching your stories, checking your profile, reading your posts with growing suspicion. All of it is theater, a desperate attempt to convince themselves, I'm still in control. But as time passes and your silence remains unbroken, the cracks begin to show. There are no signs you're coming back, no reactions, no emotional cues to feed on. And that's when denial begins to break. The narcissist starts feeling a discomfort they can't quite name, an internal unease they won't admit. They begin testing the waters, not to understand your feelings, but to measure how much power they've lost. That's when the vague messages begin. Just checking to see if you're okay. This song reminded me of you. Anyway, hope you're happy, but make no mistake. These aren't acts of care. They're tests, hooks, attempts to see if you're still susceptible. If you respond, even with a single emoji, they'll translate it as, see, I still have influence. If you remain silent, they grow restless, and in that restlessness, a new and terrifying reality begins to take form. You may actually be gone. That's the moment part of their ego begins to collapse, not because they love you, but because they've lost the mirror that once reflected their carefully crafted illusion, and that is what throws the narcissist into crisis. 2. The rage of a challenged ego. When denial no longer works, when you remain silent, unresponsive, and continue living without them, the narcissist begins to spiral into an internal crisis. This is when anger starts to take form. But it's not ordinary anger. It's a deep, ego-wounded fury born from humiliation, from rejection, and from the loss of perceived power. Narcissists don't know how to process abandonment in a healthy way. They lack the capacity for self-reflection or genuine growth. They don't ask questions like, what did I do wrong? Or why couldn't they stay? Instead, their minds spiral into hostile interpretations. You're ungrateful. You're just trying to manipulate them. You'll regret walking away from someone like them. This is when they shift from self-soothing to self-agitation. Every word you once said, every action you ever took becomes twisted into evidence that you were the problem, that you were the villain, that you were always unstable. They have to rewrite the story that way, because facing the truth that you left because of them is far too painful for their fragile psychological framework. At this point, narcissists often engage in negative projection. They cast their own toxic traits onto you. If they were emotionally detached, they'll accuse you of being cold. If they were irresponsible, they'll say you never took accountability. If they cheated, they'll start suspecting you of being unfaithful. Why do they do this? To patch up their shattered ego. They might start spreading rumors. They might trash talk you to mutual friends. They might craft a version of the story where you're the selfish one who walked away for no reason, and they're the victim of a love that wasn't returned. It's not about truth. It's about regaining control over how others see you, and more importantly, how they see themselves. At the same time, you'll notice contradictions in their behavior. On one hand, they'll post statuses declaring they've moved on or are happier than ever. On the other hand, they'll silently monitor you, dissecting your every move to see if you're really okay without them. This inner contradiction is a sign of the war raging inside them, between a shattered denial and an unresolved anger. The truth is, the more silent you are, the more their mind spins, because silence refuses to participate in their power game, and when no one plays with them, the narcissist feels like they're staring into an abyss. In their mind, a chaotic internal monologue begins. How can she be so calm? No one leave me like that. What can I do to make her realize she just lost the best thing she ever had? Sometimes that anger spills outward as emotional revenge. They might jump into a new relationship, post affectionate photos, or send cruel messages to your friends. It's all a trap, all a bait designed to spark any reaction from you, pain, rage, jealousy, because that reaction, no matter how small, confirms that they still exist in your world. But what if you don't react? What if you remain grounded, calm, and never return to make things right? Then the rage has nowhere to go. It begins to burn inward. That's when anger becomes an identity crisis. The moment they can no longer answer a simple question, who am I? When I no longer control that person, and that question, though never spoken aloud, marks the beginning of a true psychological collapse. 3. The obsession begins when the narcissist can't stop thinking about you. As the narcissist slowly begins to realize that you're truly gone, their initial anger loses its power to uphold the illusion of control. The truth starts eating away at them from the inside. You're not coming back, you don't need them, and worse, you're doing just fine without them. That's when the obsession begins. But this isn't just longing. It's an obsession laced with panic, because for the first time, they're powerless to get you back. The narcissist falls into a mental loop with no escape. Why haven't you reached out? Are you thinking about them? Have you moved on with someone else? And deeper still, did you ever truly love them at all? These questions don't come from a genuine desire for understanding, but from a fear of being forgotten, something their ego simply can't tolerate. To cope, they begin to monitor you, not in an overtly aggressive way, but through subtle methods. Social media, mutual friends, and so-called accidental run-ins. They don't need to interact, they just need to see you to confirm your existence, to re-establish your position in their mental universe. Because if you vanish completely, they're forced to face the unbearable, a reality in which they no longer exist in your life. But the more they watch, the more control they lose. Every time they see you smiling, moving on, or sharing pieces of a life that no longer includes them, it confirms that you've broken free from the emotional loop they once manipulated. You're no longer orbiting around them, and that realization sends them into a tailspin. This is when the narcissist often begins reverse manipulation. They might send harmless-seeming messages like, wishing you peace always, or this song reminded me of you. These seem innocent, but they're really bait. They don't necessarily want you back, they just want to know they still occupy space in your emotional world. If you respond, even once, it's all the proof they need. I still matter. But if you stay silent, completely silent, the obsession shifts from yearning to resentment. At this point, the pain isn't just about losing you, it's about losing the power you once unknowingly gave them, and that pain isn't processed through growth. Narcissists don't know how to sit with their real emotions. Instead, they convert obsession into action, often through rebound relationships, public displays of new love, or desperate attempts to rebuild their self-image. But no matter what they do, you're still there. Not as an ex, but as an unresolved emotional wound, an earthquake within their psyche that never got closure. And that is the difference between the one who moves on and the one who stays trapped. Or, when the narcissist sees you happy without them, nothing wounds a narcissist more deeply than seeing you happy, not because you're flaunting it, but because your peace reflects something they've never had, the ability to live authentically with oneself. When you were still in a relationship with them, they were used to a version of you that was constantly struggling, trying to understand them, enduring their coldness, accepting the blame, and hoping that love might change them. In their mind, you were always the one who gave more, the one in the weaker position, the one who needed them to feel whole. When you walked away, when you began healing and rebuilding your life, something shifted in how they perceived you. They saw you smiling, not the forced, placating smile you wore to calm them, but a genuine, effortless one. They saw you pursuing passions again, reconnecting with old interests, building new friendships, or even entering a relationship where you were no longer controlled, where you no longer had to shrink yourself to make someone else feel secure. But that confused them. In the narcissist's mind, you weren't supposed to get better after them. In their twisted logic, you were supposed to be devastated for losing someone special like them. The fact that you're not doesn't just make them feel unimportant, it shatters the belief system they built around their own self-worth. Narcissists believe they are the source of value, that they are irreplaceable. They need others to be weaker in order to feel strong. They need others to suffer in order to feel significant. But your recovery, your quiet resilience, disproved that fantasy. You don't need them to live well. You don't need them to feel worthy, and that, to them, feels like erasure. Narcissists don't know how to handle losing. They lack the emotional tools to process pain with maturity, so they turn to denial. She's just pretending. Or they minimize your progress. He'll crash soon, just wait. But deep down, they know the truth. You've escaped the cycle they once controlled. And this marks a painful turning point in their perception. For the first time, they're forced to see you not as supply, not as someone they can manipulate, but as an independent being, free, strong, and no longer living in their shadow. From that moment on, envy begins to eat at them from the inside. But it's not ordinary jealousy. It's a bitter resentment born from witnessing you achieve something they can't even comprehend. Inner wholeness, and perhaps for the first time in their life, they quietly ask themselves, how can someone shine like that without me? 5. When the narcissist feels the weight of true loss. Narcissists don't experience loss the way most people do. When you first walk away, they don't immediately feel the real pain of separation. Instead, they reach for their usual defenses: denial, manipulation, distraction, replacement. But when all those strategies fail, when you don't return, when you don't react, when you thrive without them, something else begins to emerge: emptiness. And for the first time, they're forced to face a feeling they spent their whole life avoiding. They've lost you, truly and permanently. At this stage, the narcissist can no longer hide. There's no audience left to perform for, no mirror left to reflect the version of themselves they curated. All that remains is the cold, hollow space you once filled. But what they lost isn't just you. What's gone is the validation, the recognized existence, the unconditional attention you once gave. Things they never knew how to value when they had them. In psychology, this is the birthplace of an ego crisis. The narcissist begins to feel disoriented about their very identity. Who am I if I can't control that person anymore? This question doesn't come from remorse, but from internal panic. Because they've never developed a true inner self. They don't know how to exist without someone to manipulate, to respond to them, to confirm their place in the world. Now the loss starts to feel more personal. They miss the moments when you loved them, not because they love you, but because in those moments they felt important. They miss your acceptance, your patience, your forgiveness, because no one offers that to them anymore. And they begin to realize that everything they once took for granted is now an irreplaceable void. They may try to return. They might send a message disguised as care. They might weaponize their sadness as emotional bait. But you've changed. You no longer react the way you once did. You don't fall for the same traps. And that's when it hits them. Not that you stopped loving them, but that you started loving yourself more. And that is the narcissist's greatest loss. Not losing you as a person, but losing the power to manipulate, the ability to influence, the role of being the emotional center of your universe. They once believed you'd come back, that you couldn't live without them, that your love for them would always be a weakness they could exploit. But your silence and your consistency proves the opposite. You're not weak. You're strong. And you didn't come back not because you stopped feeling, but because you rose above the control. This painful truth cannot be manipulated, it cannot be denied, and when they realize they are no longer the most important person in your world, an internal collapse begins, quiet but irreversible. After fully realizing that you're never coming back, the narcissist enters a very specific stage. They restart the old cycle. They begin searching for a new supply, someone who can temporarily fill the void you left behind. They return to their familiar tactics, Love bombing, fast-paced romance, grand promises, followed by manipulation, control, and the same toxic patterns they once used with you. But this time, something is different. They no longer believe, not in the new person, but in themselves. The old tricks don't work the way they used to, not because others are immune, but because even the narcissist now feels the hollowness. They're performing, but even they don't buy the act anymore. The new person isn't like you. They don't see through the mask. They may be more pliable, easier to control, but they don't make the narcissist feel the way you once did. The narcissist starts comparing, falling silent, growing restless, and the cycle that once made them feel in control now only highlights the decay spreading quietly within. During this time, you might see them looking happy on social media, smiling pictures, affectionate captions, bold declarations about finding someone better. But don't be fooled. It's all theatre. A desperate attempt to reclaim the sense of control they've lost, a calculated move to make you feel regret. But you don't react, and your silence echoes back at them louder than any response. They no longer affect you. Narcissists feed off reactions. Without them, they're empty. And for the first time, they begin to realize that emptiness isn't just a feeling, it's their reality. Now they may start to doubt themselves. The questions they once avoided begin to surface. Why didn't that person come back? Why don't my tactics work anymore? Who am I if no one believes in my story? But instead of facing those questions head-on, they run back to what they know, reenactment, finding someone new, recreating the old script, trying to regain a sense of identity through a worn-out performance. Yet the more they repeat, the more meaningless it becomes. The more they try to love someone else, the more they realize they feel nothing. Because emotion can't be duplicated, and the experience you once gave them, raw, challenging, real, can't be replicated on demand. This cycle won't save them. It only delays the inevitable confrontation with a painful truth. They lost something truly valuable, not because you changed, but because they never grew enough to keep it. This is the stage where there is no one left to reflect them, no you, no new supply capable of filling the void, no performance convincing enough to hide the cracks that are now spreading from within, and the narcissist, who has spent a lifetime avoiding their inner world by trying to control the outer one, is finally forced to stand face to face with themselves. There is no one left to blame, no one to cast themselves against as the victim. Only one truth remains. They are slowly becoming a shadow of who they once pretended to be. The loneliness at this stage is not ordinary sadness. It is an existential emptiness, a vacuum in which they realize that everything that once made them feel alive came from the outside. And when all of that is gone, they don't know who they are. They don't know how to be. Not because they lack intelligence or life experience, but because they've never learned how to exist as a real person, with real emotions, real limits, and real wounds that need healing. And now you, the one they once saw as weak, replaceable, too emotional, are the person they think of most, not because they love you in a whole or healthy way, but because being with you once gave them access to a part of humanity they didn't possess: patience, compassion, unconditional sincerity. You were the light that softened their chaotic ego, and when you disappeared, the darkness returned, heavier than ever. Some narcissists become noticeably quieter in this stage. They no longer shine or seek attention the way they once did. They begin to isolate. Their usual performances lose their spark. They might still post pictures, still make appearances, but it all feels robotic, hollow. Sometimes they go back to old memories, reading your past messages, listening to your songs, quietly scrolling through old photos, not to reconnect with you, but to reconnect with themselves, the version of them that only seemed to exist through you. The brutal truth is, they can't tolerate this emptiness for long. They'll do anything to escape it, jump into a new relationship, bury themselves in work, chase meaningless goals. But wherever they go, one question haunts them. Why didn't that person come back? And behind that question lies a truth they never dare to speak. Because I wasn't worthy. At this point, they stop blaming you. They no longer fabricate stories to protect themselves from the truth. Deep down, though they'll never say it out loud, they know. You didn't leave because you were selfish. You left because you had to survive. You had to save yourself. And that choice, wordless, without drama, without hate, became the final mirror, the one that reflected the truth they've run from all their lives. You don't need them anymore, and they were never brave enough to become the person you truly deserved. This is the final turning point. A rare few narcissists might awaken from here. They might enter therapy, begin to explore their inner world, learn how to form real connections, but most won't. Most will repeat the cycle, but this time they'll carry a quiet knowing. You were the only one who ever truly saw them, and you were also the only one strong enough to walk away. Maybe you once stayed up all night just searching for an explanation. Maybe you waited for a message, a call, a single look of remorse from the person you had loved with all your sincerity. And maybe you asked yourself, do they ever think about me? Did I matter to them at all? Or do they realize I was the best thing that ever happened to them? But today, you no longer need those answers, because the truth is, you don't need validation from someone who didn't know how to value you when they had the chance. You don't need an apology from someone who never paused to understand the pain they caused. And you most certainly don't need to return to a place that once pushed your heart to the edge of shattering. The narcissist may take years, maybe even a lifetime, to realize that you were the best thing that ever entered their life, but by the time they do, it will be too late, because you are no longer the person they once knew. You're no longer there to react, to endure, to forgive for the 100th time. You've moved beyond the anguish, the sleepless nights, the obsessive cycles, and you've grown from the very things that once tried to break you. Your silence isn't just a severance, it's your loudest truth. It says you chose yourself, that you broke free from the loop of pain and manipulation, that you no longer play the savior because the one who needed saving was you, and you did it. If the narcissist still thinks of you, let it be a wake-up call for them. But if they don't, it doesn't take away from your worth. You are living proof that real love is not about endlessly sacrificing for those who don't know how to love. It's about returning to yourself, healing, and learning to set boundaries with compassion. You don't need to win against them. You just need to win against yourself, against the urge to go back, the fear of abandonment, the longing to be seen by those who will never be mature enough to truly see you. And if you've stayed with me until now, remember this: you are not alone. There are millions out there waking up just like you, learning to say no, learning to walk away without bitterness, and learning to love themselves with the deepest kind of compassion. The narcissist may never say thank you, but I will say it on their behalf today. Thank you for loving them with your whole heart, and thank you for being strong enough to walk away. You didn't go back. It was the very first step to freedom.